Let me ask you something real. Have you ever been in a place where your voice felt invisible? Like no matter how honest you were, how deeply you loved, how hard you tried, it all just seemed to fall into a void? You spoke your truth, offered your heart, gave your best, and yet it all bounced back, unnoticed, unacknowledged. That's where a different kind of silence begins. Not the kind born from anger or ego, not the kind used to manipulate or seek attention, but something quieter, something sacred. It's a silence that doesn't come from a desire to be missed, but from a deeper need to find yourself again. It's not about walking away in hopes that she chases you. It's about walking away so you can finally stop chasing someone who never really saw you. And what she won't expect is that this silence doesn't beg to be understood, it doesn't scream for closure, and it doesn't leave breadcrumbs. You're not disappearing to punish her. You're stepping away to protect your peace. Because there comes a moment when a man stops trying to explain himself, when he no longer argues to prove his worth or fights to be heard, and that silence becomes louder than any words ever could. It's a quiet shift, but it changes everything. That stillness she once mistook for weakness now stands as your strength. And in that space where noise once lived, confusion, arguments, explanations, there's just calm, a silence not filled with resentment, but with self-respect. And that kind of silence, that's the one that lingers, that's the one that stays with her. Because it's not just the absence of your voice, it's the presence of your peace. And when a man chooses himself that fully, without bitterness or blame, that silence becomes undeniable. It becomes a mirror. And eventually, it makes her feel the weight of everything she never listened to. Point 1. It all begins the moment you stop explaining and start detaching. There's a quiet, undeniable power in that turning point. The instant you decide you're done justifying your heart and your worth. You stop clarifying your intentions, not out of bitterness or defeat, but because you realize you've already given everything you could. You stop repeating your truth in endless variations, hoping she'll finally hear what you've been saying all along. You stop over-communicating your value, trying to make her see that your love was never meant to hurt, only to build and uplift. You stop proving that your intentions were pure, because deep down, you already know they were. And that truth no longer needs validation from anyone else. That silence you choose, the kind that doesn't beg to be understood, cuts deeper than any long-winded explanation ever could. It's not the kind of silence that sparks drama or demands attention. It's the kind that speaks volumes simply by its absence. What truly stuns her is that this time, there's no dramatic exit, no final, emotionally charged message spilling your heart across the screen. There's no desperate last attempt to be heard, no plea for validation or mercy. Instead, there's only stillness, only distance. That void you leave behind becomes a mirror, forcing her, maybe for the very first time, to sit alone with herself, her choices, her actions, and the way she treated someone who only ever tried to love her honestly and fully. There's no reaction from you to soften the blow. No energy left to deflect or explain away the discomfort she's feeling. And in that raw silence, the chase unravels completely. Because now, it's no longer about convincing you to stay. It's about her realizing that you've already left in every way that truly matters. She feels something unfamiliar. It's not guilt, and it's not love either. It's colder and sharper than both. It's the clear, undeniable realization that you're really done trying. That you've stopped holding on to the hope of being understood or accepted, and in that moment, your silence stops being a mere pause between words. It becomes the definitive ending, not loud or messy, but calm, steady, and resolute. It says everything without saying a word. I've said all I needed to say. Now I'm choosing peace over explanation, choosing myself over a conversation that will never heal what's broken. Quick break. Close your eyes for a second. Picture her. The girl you've always wanted. Feel what it would be like to actually have her. Now open your eyes, because here's the truth. Right now, you're invisible to her. You're getting outcompeted by guys with more money, better looks, higher status, and stronger game. You're playing a rigged game, and you're losing. But I've spent the last 35 years mastering this, studying, testing, and finally finding the secrets to get the girls I always wanted. You want to stop getting ignored? You want her chasing you? then you need to wake up and act. Click the link in the comments if you are truly committed and take the first step toward becoming that guy. Few spots left. Be fast or miss out your last chance to make her yours. Let's get back to it. Point 2. Everything truly changes the moment you stop playing her therapist. You start to remember in vivid detail just how often she came to you with her chaos, unfiltered, raw, and relentless. Every emotional breakdown, every crisis that seemed to spiral out of control, every tangled story filled with confusion and drama. And there you were, the calm, grounded presence in the eye of her storm. You became more than just her boyfriend. You became the safe harbor she clung to when everything else felt like it was falling apart. You patiently listened, untangled her tangled messes, and offered gentle guidance even when you were exhausted, even when your own heart was breaking quietly beneath the surface. You carried her emotional storms while carrying your own, always putting her needs before your own peace. You were her emotional lifeline, her anchor, the person who kept her world steady when everything else was unpredictable. But then something shifts. You stop showing up in that way. You stop rushing in to rescue her from the chaos she created or allowed to fester. You're no longer the free counselor, the emotional sponge who absorbs all her pain while she gives little back. You become quiet, deliberately silent, and that silence hits like a bomb. It's deafening. The emotional safety net she counted on without question, often without gratitude, vanishes. At first, she might not even notice. She might think you're just giving her space, taking a breather, or dealing with your own stuff. But as the silence lingers, as you don't check in, don't soothe, don't fix what's broken, she begins to feel something new and terrifying. She feels emotionally homeless. There's a vacuum where her anchor used to be. Not because you stopped caring about her, but because you finally started caring about yourself. You stopped sacrificing your own peace for someone who never truly valued it. That's when the truth crashes down hard. She didn't just lose a boyfriend. She lost the one person who made her feel safe emotionally. The man who soothed her fears, who made her storms less frightening, who gave everything without asking for much in return. And when that sanctuary goes silent, not just quiet but truly silent, it exposes what she tried so desperately to hide. It exposes how deeply dependent she became on your emotional labor, and how profoundly she underestimated what it meant to be loved by someone who was also healing his own wounds. The man who carried her heart gently, even when his own was breaking. And that revelation, it's painful, because she realizes she took for granted the rare gift of unconditional, patient love, and now that gift has been withdrawn. Point 3. Something profound and almost seismic happens when you stop flinching at her breadcrumbs. Those small, almost invisible attempts to pull you back in, she knows exactly how to plant them. Maybe it's a carefully crafted story filled with nostalgia and hidden meaning, something that stirs up old memories you once shared. Maybe it's a lyric from a song that once meant everything to both of you, dropped casually into a conversation or a message. Or maybe it's a simple, seemingly innocent text. Hey, hope you're good. But you know better now. You recognize the pattern. It's bait, pure and simple. Little hooks disguised as casual reach-outs designed to stir your emotions, to reopen the door just a crack, to reignite that old instinct to chase, to fix, to respond out of habit. But this time, you don't bite. You see the message. You feel that reflex rising inside you, the desire to reply, to soften the distance, but you stay still. You don't engage. You don't give in. That calm, unshakable stillness becomes a powerful force, and that force rattles her in ways words never could, because now she's not sure anymore. She used to count on your predictability, the way you would respond, clarify, reconnect, and keep the door ever so slightly cracked open just in case you wanted to walk back in. But that door, it's now firmly closed, not slammed shut in anger or bitterness, but closed with quiet certainty and peace. What she doesn't realize is that your silence isn't a tactic, not a punishment, it's clarity. It's a boundary drawn with kindness but unwavering firmness. It says, you no longer have that kind of access to me. And when she feels that boundary, when she sees the door she always assumed would be open, now locked and silent behind it, that's when the panic creeps in. Not because you're being cruel, but because she's finally seeing what it looks like when a man who once reached out for her no longer needs to. It's a truth she can't deny. And that truth shakes the foundation of everything she thought she knew about you, about her place in your life, and about what love really means. Point 4. One of the most disarming moments for her is when your silence carries no bitterness. And this is the part that confuses her the most. You're not online throwing subtle jabs or posting passive-aggressive quotes. You're not venting to mutual friends or trying to rewrite the story in your favor. You're not even cold, but you're not warm either. You're something entirely different now. Neutral, calm, grounded. And that neutrality, it's magnetic in a way she didn't expect. It pulls at her, not because it begs for attention, but because it reflects something she's never truly seen in you before. Detachment, real detachment. Not the kind where you're pretending not to care, but the kind that only comes when you truly no longer need to be understood or heard. You've stopped trying to prove your heart. You've stopped needing validation. You've stopped trying to decode the chaos she brought into your world, because now you see it clearly for what it was. And in walking away with that clarity, you've created a silence that isn't filled with rage or resentment. It's filled with peace. And that's exactly why it hits so hard. Because anger still signals connection. It means you're still invested, still hurt, still affected. But peace? Peace is the signal she never wanted to receive. The signal that you're genuinely moving on. It's the calm after the storm that doesn't look back. It's the acceptance that you no longer need answers, apologies, or explanations. That you've made peace with the ending, and more importantly, with yourself. And that kind of peace? It's not just healing, it's sacred. It means you're tending to wounds in places she can no longer reach, building a version of yourself she no longer has access to. And that silent, unbothered healing, it speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. It says, I'm done, I'm free, I'm choosing me. And there is nothing more powerful or more haunting than a man at peace with walking away. Point 5. The most haunting sound she'll ever hear is the echo of your absence, because silence doesn't just disappear, it lingers. It doesn't fade into the background, it loops quietly, consistently, beneath everything. See, when you were there, when your presence was constant, calm and steady, she filtered it through her ego. She assumed you'd always be available, always be understanding, always be there. She mistook your reliability for permanence. But now that you're gone, your absence isn't just a missing voice. It's a mental loop that plays on repeat, uninvited, and it doesn't scream. It whispers. It hums in the quiet moments when she's brushing her teeth, scrolling through her phone, sitting with friends, or lying awake at night, and your name just appears in her mind, without warning, like a ghost she can't shake. Because it's not just you she misses, it's the feeling you brought, that consistency, that grounding energy, that unspoken safety in knowing that you were always going to show up with calm when everything else in her world was chaos. And now, that energy is missing. There's a stillness where your presence used to be, and it doesn't go unnoticed. It becomes her silent playlist, the one she didn't ask for but can't turn off. The unanswered questions, the missed opportunities, the things she never said, they all become a kind of white noise that follows her around, and the longer that silence lingers, the more it begins to shift in her mind. At first it's confusion, then curiosity, but eventually it becomes regret, not because of what you did, but because of what she didn't value when she had the chance. That's the weight of a good man's silence. It doesn't yell, it doesn't accuse, it just stays missing. And that ache, it lasts far longer than any argument ever could. Point 6. Nothing shakes her deeper than witnessing your happiness when she's no longer the reason behind it. See, for a long time, even after things ended, she carried this quiet assumption that some part of you was still orbiting her, that maybe you were hurting, that maybe you were still checking for her, holding space for her, waiting on the edge of a hope she never fully earned. But that illusion begins to crumble the moment she sees you smiling, really smiling, and she's nowhere in sight. Maybe it's a picture you didn't even post for attention. Maybe someone casually mentions you're doing well, or maybe there's no visible evidence at all, but the silence surrounding you suddenly feels different, lighter, healthier, whole. It doesn't sound like heartbreak anymore. It sounds like peace. And peace, when it no longer includes her, hits different. That's when it sinks in. You're no longer waiting. You're not holding your breath hoping she circles back. You're not watching stories, scanning for signs, or checking timestamps like you used to. You're not tied to the what-ifs or the version of her you thought would eventually show up. That version never did. And you're done holding space for someone who didn't value the seat. You've stopped replaying old memories like they're sacred. You've stopped needing her to see your worth because you finally started seeing it yourself. And that kind of growth, that kind of release, it radiates. It shows up in the ease in your laugh, in the stillness in your spirit, in the way you've stopped performing pain just to prove how deeply you felt. You're not just getting by without her. You're blooming. You're rebuilding your life brick by brick, and for the first time in a long time, it actually feels like yours again. And here's the truth. No matter how stoic she appears, no matter how convincingly she acts like she's fine, that energy shift does not go unnoticed, because she always counted on you being emotionally available, even in your absence. One text away, one phone call from slipping back into that familiar pattern. But now, you're not just physically gone, you're emotionally gone. You're mentally unavailable, you're spiritually untouchable. You're not angry, you're not bitter, you're just free. And that smile she sees or hears about, it becomes proof that she wasn't your source of joy after all. You were. She realizes that the light she once assumed came from her attention was actually coming from your soul. And now that you've reclaimed it, she's not just watching you move on, she's watching you rise. And that moment, that realization, it doesn't just sting, it echoes. Because when a man stops waiting to be chosen and chooses himself instead, that's a story she'll replay in her mind long after you've stopped caring how it ends. Point 7. This is the ultimate level, the most profound and powerful stage of all. It's the moment when you sit quietly with yourself and make peace with the fact that you may never hear from her again, that you might never get a text, a call, an apology, or any sign that she regrets what happened. And yet somehow you find yourself genuinely okay with that. Not okay in a fake, forced way, but truly at peace. This is the kind of closure that doesn't rely on a conversation or a confrontation because it comes from a place far deeper than words. It means you've stopped needing anything from her at all. No explanations, no last chances, no validation. You've chosen yourself, your worth, and your healing over holding on to what was lost. And that choice, that grounded, calm, unwavering self-respect is so rare, so profound that it becomes unforgettable. She'll feel it in moments she doesn't expect, waves of realization washing over her long after the noise has faded. Maybe years from now, she'll sense that space where you once were, empty but full of something far greater, a man who no longer bends or breaks for anyone who doesn't see his value. But by then, you won't be watching anymore. You won't be waiting for her to come back or wondering what might have been. You'll be living your life fully, freely, and fiercely with a quiet strength that no one can take from you. So listen to me, bro. Silence doesn't beg. Silence doesn't chase. Silence doesn't explain or justify itself. It simply walks away, steady, sure, and unshakable, and leaves her with the weight of what she lost. Not just any man, but a man who finally remembered his worth and refused to settle for less. If you're in that phase right now, if you've stopped talking and started growing, drop this in the comments, quiet strength. Because that's what this is. The power to say nothing while everything inside you shifts. The strength to hold your peace even when the world demands noise. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. If this message spoke to you or gave you something to think about, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new drop. I've got more real talk, more growth, and more power coming your way. So stay locked in. And if you're going through something right now, just remember, your silence can say more than 1,000 words ever could. Take care of yourself, keep rising, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.